In today's episode, we're exploring 3 rich people who got mauled by animals. From a woman who thought emotional bonding matters most when handling bears to an investment banker who misjudged the patience of a massive alligator. Let's begin with the first story, where one man's business success couldn't prepare him for Africa's deadliest predator. It was June 8th, 2015, and the golden evening light stretched across the sprawling 200-acre ranch outside San Antonio, Texas, as Robert Castellanos made his way toward the exotic animal compound he had built with his construction fortune. The 45-year-old magnate had spent the last decade transforming his property into what he called his personal wildlife sanctuary, complete with approved enclosures housing some of the world's most dangerous predators. The compound sat nestled among rolling hills dotted with mesquite trees, far from the commercial developments that had made Bobby one of South Texas's most successful contractors. Bobby had built his empire from nothing, starting with a single bulldozer and growing his company into a multi-million-dollar operation specializing in shopping centers and office complexes across the region. His success had afforded him the luxury of pursuing his childhood fascination with big cats, leading him to obtain the necessary permits and construct professional-grade facilities that rivaled many accredited zoos. The compound housed 6 exotic cats, including tigers, leopards, and his prized possession, a magnificent 400-pound African lion named Caesar. The ranch employed 2 experienced handlers who maintained strict safety protocols, but Bobby's growing confidence around the animals had led him to bend the rules more frequently in recent months. His staff had noticed Caesar's increasing aggression during the current mating season, with the massive male displaying territorial behaviors that made even the veteran handlers more cautious. Bobby, however, dismissed their concerns, believing his daily interactions with Caesar had created a special bond that transcended the animal's wild instincts. What his handlers didn't know was that Bobby had been secretly entering enclosures during their lunch breaks, taking selfies with the cats to impress potential investors who toured the facility. These unauthorized visits had become increasingly frequent, with Bobby developing a dangerous routine of testing how close he could get to each animal without triggering defensive responses. The construction magnate's overconfidence stemmed from a childhood spent on his grandfather's cattle ranch, where he had learned to handle unpredictable livestock with apparent ease. Bobby often boasted to visitors about his natural ability to read animal behavior, claiming he could sense when predators were agitated or calm. His success in business had reinforced his belief that he possessed special insights that others lacked, leading him to gradually ignore the safety protocols his own money had helped establish. The ranch's insurance company had recently conducted an inspection, noting several minor violations that Bobby had promised to address, but had largely forgotten about in his busy schedule. African lions are apex predators, weighing up to 420 pounds, with males possessing incredible strength and lightning-fast reflexes that make them capable of taking down prey much larger than themselves. These social cats live in complex hierarchical structures and are highly territorial, particularly males who must constantly defend their position through displays of dominance and aggression. During mating season, male lions become especially unpredictable, with testosterone-driven behaviors that can trigger sudden attacks even against familiar humans. Their powerful jaws can deliver a bite force exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their retractable claws are designed to grip and tear flesh with devastating efficiency. As Bobby approached Caesar's enclosure that evening, he noticed the automatic water system had malfunctioned, leaving the lion's drinking trough nearly empty in the oppressive Texas heat. His primary handler had driven into town for supplies and wouldn't return for at least an hour, but Bobby couldn't bear the thought of Caesar suffering from dehydration while he waited. The construction magnate had entered the enclosure dozens of times before during routine maintenance, always following lockout procedures that ensured the lion was secured in a separate section. Bobby's fatal oversight came when he failed to verify that the interior gate between the enclosure sections had been properly secured after maintenance work earlier that day. A worker had left the heavy steel barrier partially open, a gap of less than 18 inches that appeared closed from Bobby's viewing angle, but provided enough space for the massive lion to squeeze through. Bobby unlocked the service entrance and stepped into what he believed was the secure section of the compound, carrying a garden hose to manually refill the water system. The attack began the moment Bobby bent over the water trough with his back turned to the interior of the enclosure. Caesar had silently moved moved through the gap in the barrier, his padded paws making no sound on the concrete floor as he approached the unsuspecting human who had invaded his territory. The lion's predatory instincts activated instantly when Bobby's vulnerable position triggered Caesar's hunting response, the massive cat covering the 20 feet between them in less than 3 seconds. Caesar's 400-pound frame struck Bobby with the force of a small vehicle, driving him face first into the concrete wall beside the water trough. The lion's massive jaws clamped down on Bobby's neck and head, his 4-inch canine teeth puncturing through major arteries while applying crushing pressure that damaged the cervical vertebrae. Bobby's body convulsed as Caesar's powerful bite severed the carotid arteries and compressed his airway, causing rapid blood loss and asphyxiation that led to immediate incapacitation. The lion maintained his deadly grip for nearly a minute as Bobby's struggles quickly weakened, Caesar's territorial instincts driving him to ensure complete submission of the perceived threat. The massive cat's razor-sharp claws raked across Bobby's back and shoulders during the brief struggle, opening deep gashes while his crushing bite continued to restrict blood flow and breathing. Bobby's movements ceased within 90 seconds as the combination of severe blood loss and oxygen deprivation overwhelmed his system, his body going limp in Caesar's powerful jaws. Caesar released his grip only after Bobby had been motionless for several moments, the lion's instincts confirming that the intruder no longer posed any challenge to his dominance. The massive predator retreated to the far corner of the enclosure, his territorial display complete as he settled into a watchful position near the barrier gap through which he had entered. Bobby's handler discovered the scene upon returning from town 2 hours later, immediately calling emergency services and wildlife authorities to report the incident. The investigation revealed the maintenance oversight that had left the interior gate unsecured, though officials noted that Bobby had violated standard safety protocols by entering the enclosure alone. Caesar was tranquilized and relocated to an accredited sanctuary in Colorado, where he would live under enhanced security measures designed to prevent similar incidents. The tragedy prompted immediate reviews of private exotic animal facilities across Texas, with new regulations requiring redundant safety systems and mandatory buddy protocols for all enclosure entries. Bobby's construction company established a wildlife conservation fund in his memory, ensuring that his passion for big cats would continue supporting legitimate conservation efforts. His death became a stark reminder that wealth and good intentions cannot overcome the fundamental reality that wild animals remain wild, regardless of human familiarity. Yet big cats weren't the only exotic animals that could prove deadly when their natural behaviors were underestimated. In the mountains of Tennessee, a pharmaceutical heiress would discover that even the most well-intentioned rescue efforts could turn fatal when seasonal instincts overrode years of apparent docility. It was September 19, 2016, and the crisp mountain air carried the scent of changing leaves as Catherine Morrison prepared for her evening enrichment routine at her bear sanctuary, nestled in the foothills near Gatlinburg, Tennessee. The 34-year-old heiress had inherited a pharmaceutical fortune that allowed her to pursue her passion for wildlife rescue, establishing what she believed was a model facility for rehabilitating black bears on her 150-acre mountain property. The sanctuary housed 3 rescued bears in spacious enclosures designed to mimic their natural habitat, while providing the security necessary for animals that could never be returned to the wild. Kate had grown up surrounded by privilege, but had always felt drawn to conservation work, using her inheritance to create what she envisioned as a more humane alternative to traditional wildlife management. She had obtained the necessary permits and consulted with wildlife biologists during the facility's construction, but her philosophical differences with standard safety protocols had led to increasing tensions with her professional advisors. Kate believed that her gentle approach and daily interactions with the bears created bonds that transcended the animal's wild nature. The sanctuary's star resident was Bella, a 300-pound female black bear who had been rescued as an orphaned cub 3 years earlier after her mother was killed by poachers. Kate had personally bottle-fed Bella during her early months and maintained daily contact throughout the bear's development into a powerful adult. The approaching autumn had triggered Bella's natural preparation for winter hibernation, a process that dramatically altered the bear's behavior and dietary needs. What Kate didn't realize was that her consulting biologist had specifically warned against any direct contact during this critical period, but the message had been buried in a lengthy email that Kate had only skimmed while traveling to a conservation conference in Colorado. Kate's daily routine with Bella had become almost ritualistic over the past 3 years. With the heiress spending hours each day observing and interacting with the bear, she considered her greatest success story. She had documented Bella's progress extensively, creating photo albums and video journals that she planned to use for fundraising presentations to other wealthy philanthropists philanthropists. Kate's confidence in her methods had grown to the point where she regularly dismissed the concerns of her professional staff, believing that her emotional connection with the animals provided insights that formal training could never match. The sanctuary had recently passed a state inspection with only minor recommendations, but the inspector had specifically noted concerns about Kate's hands-on approach during the fall feeding season. Kate had assured the inspector that she understood the risks, but maintained that her personal relationship with each bear allowed her to recognize warning signs that others might miss. Her staff had grown increasingly uncomfortable with her practices, but Kate's financial control over the facility made it difficult for anyone to challenge her decisions directly. American black bears are highly intelligent omnivores that can weigh up to 600 pounds, with females being particularly focused on caloric intake during the fall months leading to hibernation. During this period, known as hyperphagia, bears enter an intense feeding phase where they can consume up to 20,000 calories per day to build the fat reserves necessary for surviving winter dormancy. This biological imperative makes bears extremely food aggressive and unpredictable, as their survival instincts override all other considerations, including familiarity with human caretakers. Kate's decision to personally deliver seasonal enrichment items to Bella's enclosure reflected her hands-on management philosophy. Despite repeated warnings from her consulting biologist about the dangers of entering bear enclosures during hyperphagia, she had successfully conducted similar enrichment activities throughout the spring and summer months, placing toys, treats, and environmental stimulation items that kept Bella mentally engaged. Kate's confidence in her relationship with the bear had grown with each successful interaction, leading her to dismiss the seasonal behavioral changes as temporary mood shifts. The fatal encounter began when Kate entered Bella's enclosure carrying a basket filled with pumpkins, apples, and other seasonal treats, designed to provide mental stimulation and nutritional variety. Bella had been resting in the shade of a large oak tree but immediately focused on Kate's arrival, her powerful sense of smell detecting the food items from across the enclosure. The bear's approach seemed normal at first, matching the casual interest she had shown during previous enrichment sessions. Bella's behavior shifted dramatically as Kate began arranging the food items near the enclosure's central feeding area. The bear's hyperphagia-driven instincts interpreted Kate's presence near the food as direct competition for critical caloric resources, triggering an aggressive response that had never manifested during previous interactions. Bella's casual approach transformed into a determined advance as she moved to claim the food items that her survival instincts demanded she protect. Kate recognized the change in Bella's demeanor and began moving toward the enclosure exit, but her retreat was hampered by the wet autumn leaves that had accumulated near the gate area. Her feet slipped on the slick surface as she attempted to quicken her pace, causing her to fall heavily just 15 feet from the safety of the exit. Bella's food defensive instincts activated fully when Kate's fall positioned her directly between the bear and the scattered food items. The bear's attack was swift and devastating as 300 pounds of muscle and bone struck Kate's prone form with tremendous force. Bella's powerful paws delivered crushing blows to Kate's chest and abdomen, her razor-sharp claws opening deep gashes while the impact fractured multiple ribs and damaged internal organs. The bear's massive jaws bit repeatedly at Kate's face and shoulders, her powerful teeth tearing through flesh and muscle as her food defensive response overwhelmed any recognition of the familiar human. Kate's body convulsed under the tremendous pressure as Bella's instinctive food protection response drove her to continue the mauling attack. The bear's claws raked across Kate's arms and torso as she bit down on Kate's shoulder and upper arm, her survival programming creating an overwhelming defensive reaction that had nothing to do with 3 years of positive human interaction. Kate's movements gradually weakened as blood loss and internal injuries overwhelmed her system, her body going limp as Bella's reactive aggression began to subside. The bear's attack ceased as Kate stopped moving, Bella's food defensive instincts no longer triggered by perceived competition. The massive animal retreated to the scattered enrichment items, her hyperphagia-driven focus returning to the critical caloric resources that had sparked the fatal encounter. Kate's groundskeeper discovered the scene 30 minutes later during his evening security rounds, immediately calling emergency services and wildlife authorities. The investigation revealed that Kate had violated her facility's own safety protocols by entering the enclosure alone during the critical hyperphagia period. Bella was eventually euthanized after the fatal encounter. The incident prompted immediate reviews of private wildlife facilities across Tennessee, with new regulations requiring enhanced safety training and mandatory seasonal restrictions on human-animal interactions. Kate's family established a scholarship fund for wildlife biology students, ensuring that her passion for conservation would continue supporting properly trained professionals. Her death highlighted the critical importance of understanding seasonal animal behaviors, even among species that appear docile during other times of the year. But bears weren't the only animals whose seasonal behaviors could prove deadly to overconfident caretakers. In the swamps of Louisiana, an investment banker's return to his roots would put him face to face with one of North America's most patient and explosive predators. It was March 14, 2017, and the humid evening air hung heavy over the cypress-lined waterways surrounding Vincent Broussard's exotic animal breeding facility near Lake Charles, Louisiana. The 41-year-old former investment banker had returned to his native Louisiana after making millions on Wall Street, using his fortune to establish what he claimed was a legitimate commercial operation, breeding American alligators for leather and meat production. The facility sprawled across 20 acres of reclaimed swampland, featuring concrete enclosures and climate-controlled buildings designed to house some of the largest reptiles in North America. Vincent had grown up in the Louisiana bayous, where encounters with alligators were simply part of daily life for anyone who spent time around the water. His childhood experiences hunting and fishing in gator-infested waters had given him a confidence around large reptiles that impressed the state wildlife officials who inspected his facility. Vincent employed one part-time handler, but preferred to work alone during evening feeding routines, believing his intimate knowledge of alligator behavior made additional supervision unnecessary. The facility's prize breeding male was a 12-foot monster named Big Jake, whose impressive size and aggressive temperament made him valuable for producing offspring with desirable commercial traits. Vincent had acquired Jake from a failed roadside attraction in Florida, and the massive reptile had adapted well to his new Louisiana home. However, the cooler March temperatures had made Jake increasingly lethargic, and his refusal to feed for several days had begun to concern Vincent about the animal's health and breeding potential. What Vincent hadn't mentioned to his insurance company was his habit of testing the alligator's responsiveness by tapping the water surface with feeding poles during off hours. He had developed this routine after reading outdated wildlife management texts from the 1980s, believing that regular stimulation would keep the reptiles alert and healthy. His part-time handler had never witnessed these sessions, as Vincent conducted them exclusively during evening hours when he worked alone. The practice had become almost compulsive, with Vincent spending increasingly longer periods trying to provoke responses from animals that showed signs of seasonal lethargy. American alligators are apex predators that can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds, with adult males being particularly territorial and aggressive during breeding season. These ancient reptiles possess incredible patience and explosive power, capable of remaining motionless for hours before launching devastating attacks that can crush bones and tear limbs from bodies. Their bite force can exceed 3,000 pounds per square inch, while their death roll technique is designed to disorient prey and cause massive trauma through rapid spinning motions. Vincent's concern about Big Jake's feeding behavior led him to make an unscheduled evening visit to the alligator's concrete enclosure, hoping to encourage the massive reptile to resume normal eating patterns. The 12-foot male had been floating motionlessly in the center of his pool for most of the day, showing none of the aggressive feeding responses that typically characterized his behavior. Vincent believed that personal attention and hand feeding might stimulate Jake's appetite and resolve what he assumed was a temporary health issue. The fatal mistake occurred when Vincent approached too close to the water's edge while attempting to encourage Big Jake to feed using a long-handled feeding pole. The concrete surrounding the enclosure had become slick with evening condensation, and Vincent's focus on the apparently lethargic alligator caused him to underestimate the treacherous footing. His confidence in Jake's sluggish condition led him to position himself within striking distance of the water, believing the cold-stunned reptile posed no immediate threat. Big Jake's explosive attack shattered the evening silence as 650 pounds of muscle and bone erupted from the water with shocking speed. The massive alligator's jaws snapped shut on Vincent's leg with bone-crushing force, his razor-sharp teeth puncturing deep into flesh and muscle, while his powerful bite caused severe tissue damage and potential fractures. Vincent's scream of pain and terror echoed across the facility as Jake's prehistoric instincts took control of the situation. The alligator's death roll began immediately as Jake used his massive body weight and powerful tail to spin Vincent in the water, the rapid rotation causing devastating trauma to the trapped leg while disorienting the banker and preventing any coordinated escape attempts. Vincent's desperate struggles to reach the concrete edge only triggered Jake's feeding response further. the alligator's grip tightening as his prey's movements confirmed the success of his ambush attack. Vincent's body was pulled completely into the enclosure as Jake's death roll continued, the massive reptile's spinning motion causing massive soft tissue destruction and blood loss, while preventing Vincent from maintaining his position above water. The alligator's powerful jaws maintained their crushing grip as Vincent's struggles gradually weakened, his body going limp as severe trauma and drowning combined to end his desperate fight for survival. Jake continued his death roll for several more minutes before releasing his grip and retreating to the deeper section of his enclosure. Vincent's part-time employee discovered the scene the following morning when he arrived for routine feeding duties, immediately calling emergency services and wildlife authorities to report the incident. The investigation revealed that Vincent had approached the enclosure alone during evening hours, violating his own facility's safety protocols that required two-person teams for all alligator interactions. Big Jake was eventually destroyed while the breeding operation was permanently closed, pending investigation. The incident prompted immediate reviews of commercial alligator operations across Louisiana, with new regulations requiring enhanced safety equipment and mandatory buddy systems for all animal interactions. Vincent's investment firm established a conservation fund supporting legitimate wildlife research, ensuring that his passion for his native Louisiana's ecosystem would continue benefiting scientific understanding. His death served as a sobering reminder that childhood familiarity with dangerous animals cannot overcome the fundamental reality that wild predators remain wild, regardless of human confidence or commercial interests. Thanks for watching. Click the next video for the next stories.